Well, guys, before we start here, I think we actually have to issue a massive apology to the Vancouver Whitecaps, who we chirped real bad on last week's show, but who nonetheless ended up coming up big for Toronto FC this past week. Yes, after a wild week in Canadian soccer circles, the Reds will face Forge FC in the final of the 2020 Canadian Championship. When or where, we don't know that yet, but we'll talk a little bit about that a bit later on in this week's jam-packed edition of Waking the Red Weekly. My name is Mitchell Tierney. Our former Waking the Red overlord, Charlie O'Connor Clark, will be our guest on this week's show from CanPL.ca. He'll join us to talk all things Island games plus more. But first, guys, we hope you're enjoying our new virtual digs, our new studio here. Jeff Nesker, of course, celebrating Forge's big win.
Oh, yes, indeed. I brought out the big guns, Mitchell.
Won't be wearing that in a couple months, I imagine, when they play Toronto FC.
Months,
we'll get Jeff's.
Do you know something I don't? Months.
Maybe. And Michael Singh, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Mitch. Thanks for having me, obviously, again. JPN, I love the third jersey there.
Thank you. I got the collar right after you asked me to adjust it earlier, and so I'm feeling good again.
Yeah, so I think we should start this week's show probably by rewinding all the way to last Wednesday. Toronto FC taking on, or rather not Toronto FC, the Vancouver Whitecaps taking on Montreal Impact in a game that had massive implications for Toronto FC. Montreal, all they needed was a win in order to get through to their second straight Voyageurs Cup final. But of course, things did not go at all to plan. Rudy Camacho knee punch will now go down in Voyageurs Cup lore in a way that so many moments have before. I guess we'll start with you, Michael. Your thoughts on a match that, I mean, we said it. These things always end in a crazy way, but I don't think I expected it to go down quite like that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, Toronto, Montreal in a Canadian championship. You know something's going down. But as you said, we just didn't know it'd be Rudy Camacho being our hero. I think we're all kind of hoping that the Vancouver Whitecaps would be the ones that would, come through with kind of play hero for us. But little do we know, Rudy Camacho in the 40th minute there. I couldn't believe it. I was kind of half asleep during that game. It was late at night. So, and then all of a sudden Rudy Camacho goes for this karate chop or whatever it was on this guy's leg. And I was wide awake from that point on, and I was happy to see Vancouver, come out on top. And shout out Freddie Montero as well, because he was fantastic, and I think he followed it up this week with another great performance. So, yeah, let's go Vancouver Whitecaps, right?
Yeah. Week 2 of Vancouver Whitecaps fan blog. One thing I will mention is that we need to will this in existence. That move is the Rudy Camacho double-double, considering the gift he gave to Nick DeLeon the game before. So yeah, double agent for TFC. 3 cheers for Rudy. TFC's secret weapon. That was a hell of a game. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I expected to be a lot more angry the day after than I was. So that day was gravy for me.
Yeah, shout out to the Whitecaps. I mean, again, we said one of the most confusing teams probably in MLS right now, but a couple wins last week, all of a sudden they're in a playoff spot and, looking at least decent in the MLS Western Conference. But let's talk about what's now going to be a very interesting final because, as we heard last week on our sister show, Footy Talks Live, it sounds like it's going to be a while before this game gets played. Toronto FC looking to have it played after their season, which I think makes the most sense considering, all sorts of different factors that we have right now in scheduling sports during these COVID times. But that presents a game that, it is so intriguing on multiple different levels, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm prepared to wait. I mean, I know trying to divine the future, a COVID-free future is a fool's errand. But, there's been a lot of ideas thrown around about how this can happen quicker. One is, of course, playing it in the States. One is taking into account that the temperatures in December and January aren't going to be the most agreeable for outdoor soccer. That being said, I have frozen my absolute soul off BMO for, and I'm willing to do it again, I just think. So people were saying, maybe they play it at BMO training ground in an indoor bubble, and that would hurt my soul. I mean, if there was ever a game that deserves fans in some capacity, it's this one. And I think I also mentioned that considering that COVID soccer has opened the floodgates for just about every VR company in the world to bid on some kind of virtual stadium kind of thing, if they played it in an indoor bubble, do you not think that the entire floor to ceiling of that interior space would be plastered with some kind of virtual ad scheme that would be distracting and we would lose the ball all the time? So yeah, it's double negatives for me. I realize that there's a distinct possibility that this is going to get played in less than ideal situations at a less than ideal time. But I'm still holding on hope that the fates align and this becomes, maybe this is the first game that we all go back to as fans. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, I mean, that would signify just the move in Canada soccer that kind of cap it off really nicely, just what a year it's been. And Canada soccer being at that forefront for fans to start coming back to games in Canada. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, there is that reality that it probably isn't going to happen, especially considering that it'll be winter too when these games might get played in the middle of December. What about a cold night in December at BMO Field? How about that again? That would be something. But yeah, just listen to Bill Manning on Footy Talks, I guess earlier this week or last week, sorry. And him talking about the potential of a Canadian Championship final in December, January. I feel like it was discussed beforehand, obviously, but with the Canadian Premier League clubs and Canada Soccer and obviously Toronto FC and Montreal Impact and Vancouver Whitecaps were obviously in that discussion as well. And the reason why it has to be played after the MLS season is just because TFC are not going to have any time to come back and have a 14-day quarantine and then play games, right? TFC are looking at a schedule right now where they're going to be playing a midweek game and then a game on the weekend for the rest of the year. We obviously don't know what the official schedule looks like, but that's what we're hearing right now from the club. And you take into account the travel in the United States as well, and there's just no time to fit in the game and fit in that 14-day quarantine that would have to happen if TFC returned to Canada and try to play a game, let alone the match fitness that they'd need after the 14-day quarantine, the game sharpness, stuff like that. So you're looking another 3 weeks after returning from the States. The alternative, I guess, would have been to send the Canadian Premier League team down to the States. Again, I just don't know if there's any time, but I can understand where the frustration is coming from both, or from the Forge fan base, I guess, who are complaining about their team not being in shape, etc., having a new look team, which I understand. But man, these are the times you got to adjust. JPN, what would you like to?
Well, I mean, I'm going to quote the stats goat Martin Bailey here because I don't think anybody put it more eloquently than he did. We're talking about issues of team shape and form in CONCACAF. I mean, are you new? That's CONCACAF, right? Like MLS teams have been raging against the dying of this light for as long as this tournament's been going on. I mean, we face Liga MX squads that are 5 weeks into their season, if not more. So they're rounding into form, and we're freezing cold. I mean, we barely had a chance to see the pitch yet before we have bottles of urine thrown at us. So I don't understand the frustration, if I'm being honest. It seems a little bit. It just seems a little bit misplaced because the reality of CONCACAF is that fairness doesn't exist. It hasn't in the before times, and to expect that it would in the post-COVID times, during the COVID times, is insane. So I think it's a whole lot of grinding metal, personally.
Yeah, what I would add is I would be surprised if this game gets played in Toronto. I think, as you guys have both alluded to, there's been a lot of talk about how the MLS side, Toronto FC, gets the big advantage here and have been throwing their weight around. And I think there's going to be an appetite to play this game somewhere else, potentially somewhere out on the West Coast. I think it just makes a lot more sense to have a neutral venue in this case versus playing it at BMO Field, as much as I think that would be a lot of fun. Certainly for us here, we would enjoy that. But I think in the idea of some semblance of fairness, I think this might end up being played at a neutral venue somewhere. Although who, as I said, it's or as Jeff said, it's a kind of a fool's errand right now to try and predict anything that's going on right now. Let's move on quickly to the MLS game Toronto FC played this week, and a very different discussion. Certainly in terms of the happiness that everyone shared at them getting to the Voyageurs Cup final. But I think a good stat this week from the stats goat again, Martin Bailey, saying that Toronto FC have now conceded 50 times in their history in the 85th minute or later. That's 9.3% of all Toronto FC matches end in them allowing a late goal. And certainly this season has added to that a couple of times now. We'll start with you, Michael. Your thoughts on, yet another match that got away from Toronto FC.
Yeah, I feel like there's just like a million different storylines within that match. It started before the game, I guess, with Toronto FC, Greg Vanney opting to run out Eric Z there at center back. And I'll start with my thoughts on Eric Zavaleta. He had a shaky start, but I honestly thought he came into his own that game, and he settled down, and he did what was asked of him. He obviously wasn't on the pitch when Toronto FC conceded that equalizer, so we can't point fingers at Eric Z, even though we like to almost every time we can. So, shout out to him because he had a great performance. So first and foremost, secondly, Griffin Yao, the 17-year-old from DC United who scored that equalizer. DC ran out a couple of teenagers on their pitch, against Toronto FC there, and they were hanging in their own. And while TFC obviously did dictate that match and dominated that match, as they should, because based on the amount of injuries that DC had and just based on the fact that TFC are a better side, they should dominate that match. But shout out to the 17-year-old who comes on and equalizes that game, steps up to the moment. I mean, I feel like he was involved the entire time he was on too. So it goes to show that if you have some youngsters in your academy that are talented, they can make a difference at this level. So maybe that's a little hint, nudge to Greg Vanney over here, and we have some youngsters coming up in Toronto FC. We saw what kind of get a little off topic here. We saw Jordan Perusa did at the USL. What a double that was. But we can talk about that more because I'm sure there's a lot to break down with that. Just getting back to the game, and then you want to go back to that league equalizer. Oh man, Greg Vanney dropped to a 5 at the back, 3 at the back, whatever you want to call it. But there were 3 center backs now playing, and he cited a lack of midfield depth for that reason. Everyone watching that game, including the commentator Stephen Caldwell, was wondering why you sort of make that decision. And sort of your team's playing well, you're dictating pace, you're controlling the midfield. Why take someone out of that and, I guess shore up the back there? Because all of that does, it sort of allows DC United now to gain moments where they can counter. They have more space on the field to come at you, right? So I felt like that was an important moment for Greg Vanney to, alter in the match, and it came back to bite TFC obviously when all 3, Quentin Westberg, I think it was Omar Gonzalez and Chris Mavinga, all went for the same ball, and it was Griffin Yao who put the ball in the back of the net. So another late equalizer conceded by TFC, and it's a little worrying, as I think Mitch you kind of touched on.
Yeah, I think I asked this in our chat, and I'm going to paraphrase myself, but what European super smart squad is Greg Vanney emulating with these formation changes and personnel changes at the 88th minute? Because I've watched a lot of soccer over the last couple of months, and I can't remember another top-of-the-line coach, elite squad making wholesale changes like that. Like, if you're going to park the bus, do it with the guys that you have on the field. Do you know what I mean? It just, and I would argue TFC is not a park the bus kind of team. But, adding more intrigue in terms of a total switch over to fresh legs to close out a game. Has that ever worked for us? Ever? Once? I'm trying to think. I don't know if it has. I do want to say that I got a private chat message that Charlie's ready to go. So if we want to bring him on earlier, it's choose your fighter. But that's my point on the Vanny mess until we get to talk about it with Charlie for a little bit.
Yeah, I will say it's it's a good thing they won the Voyageurs Cup. I'll say that, because this week looks very different if they don't. There's a bit of a glass half full in the sense that they now have a decent amount of time. They're pretty firmly in a playoff position right now. Obviously, I think probably what has happened so far might have cost them a chance at the Supporters Shield, but the Supporters Shield's, I don't know if it's worth what it's been worth in the past in terms of, there's going to be a ton of asterisks related to any Supporters Shield winner this year. So if there was a year to miss out on it, I think this might have been the one. But yeah, like I said, there is the proof that they can turn this around in last year, where, halfway through the year, we were having kind of similar discussions, and then they were, over the course of the season, able to put together a good run and figure things out. And, last year, I feel like that did kind of cost them the Voyageurs Cup, because they really had to try and make the playoffs first and foremost over the second half of the season. But this year, they already have that cup in their back pocket. So, if you want to look at the glass half full, kind of angle on all this, it's that they do now have a bit of time to try and figure things out and put themselves in a best position. Obviously, Toronto FC is one of those clubs that always wants to be better than what they've shown so far this year. But I think they do at least have a decent opportunity here to turn things around. But as you said, I think Charlie is here, so we'll bring him on momentarily to talk about the Island games. But there he is. Wow. Mr. Villa in the house.
Tony Gallagher superfan himself. There we go.
What's going on, Charlie? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm trying to figure out what to do with myself now that the Island games are over.
Hey, it was a busy little stretch for you guys, though, and what a stretch it was. Just talk to us a little bit about what a success, I guess, overall the games were.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a wild ride. I think it was 6 weeks and 35 games, and every coach was like, "Oh my God, we're playing every 3 days," and we're all exhausted. But it was really awesome to just have it all going down. I think most of the games, at least, were really entertaining. I think it was really competitive. We didn't really have kind of what happened in last year's CPL season, where two teams are just a cut above the rest of them, right? So I think there was just a lot that was kind of enjoyable, just especially if you're a casual fan. I think they were just fun soccer games. I don't know if you guys felt the same, but I mean, I guess I'm biased. I had a really great time watching them all.
I mean, me too. I also enjoyed the math and the sort of dark cloud of chaos that was hanging over all the results. How many 1-1 draws can you have, and how many teams in first place can exist was, I think, the question of the day. But congratulations. Certainly 0 positive tests is absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's kind of the gold standard for bubble games at this point. And having it go off without a hitch in these troubled times is not easy. And so I think that can't be overstated.
Yeah. I think it really did come off a lot. I don't want to not smoother than we expected, but maybe when you go into something with so many moving parts, you might expect something to hit a snag at some point. But it did seem like everything went extremely smoothly. I mean, all the people that have come back from the bubble now have been kind of just thanking each other for the work that they did. And it does sound like I wasn't obviously in PEI, but I was kind of on the periphery. And it sounds like everything was really working really smoothly. I think maybe after the first couple of games, they sort of started to hit a rhythm. You go to training on this day, you'd be on the bus at X time, you come back, you do your press conferences, and then you'd have your shower and go to bed at 1 a.m. Atlantic time. But it does sound like the players kind of settled into it, and we didn't really have a lot of complaints from anybody. I mean, I'm sure that they would have liked to get out in PEI because obviously it's beautiful there. Actually, it does sound like they did a couple times. I heard there are some kind of private beach visits and things that some of the teams got to go on excursions to. Yeah. But everybody just seemed to be kind of so happy that we actually had a season of any form that it was really hard to complain about anything. So I think it was credit to all the work that everybody from all the clubs and the league higher up than me kind of put in to pull it off.
Yeah. Speaking of PEI, we've got a question from Tej, fellow WTR, and I think I'll just read it off my my printout here. There you go. We got it up.
Oh wow!
Look at our fancy new digs here, Charlie.
Ooh, it's so fancy.
We brought these on just because you were coming on.
Yeah, this is amazing. Do I have to read that? Do you?
No, I'll read it. Hold on. Do you think this tournament, with all of its success, leaves any lasting legacy in Prince Edward Island? Could this possibly spark an interest in a future CPL franchise there?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I was kind of thinking about it earlier because I think Tej might have mentioned it to us a little earlier as well. But yeah, it's a fascinating question. I think for what it's worth, there probably already was a little bit of interest in a future CPL franchise. I mean, I'm not in those discussions, but I think what it sounds like there are definitely people interested. And just we did kind of see the island embrace the CPL. They seemed really happy to kind of have this pro sports event on their island. I think there was plenty of local coverage about it. And then maybe the most important part was you had, I think it was midway through the tournament, they were able to allow some kind of youth soccer players in to watch the games as fans. I think it started at 50, and by the final, I think it was about 100 people who could come in, and they were all cheering for Halifax, I think, obviously. But just to have these kind of local kids and PEI locals coming in to watch these games, they all seem to kind of embrace it and kind of maybe learn a lot about what professional soccer can be in Canada. So I do think that it's possible. I mean, Halifax isn't a massive market either, and that's worked really well out there, right? With their obviously their awesome stadium and their packed fan stands all the time. So I don't want to say no to PEI. I mean, I think it would be really cool out there.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned the quality of competition throughout the Island Games, Charlie. I thought that culminated really well in the final, which probably was one of the best Canadian Premier League games I've ever watched, to be honest. I think just the technical ability of the two sides and just the way, the way the game was played out tactically, I thought was fantastic. What are your thoughts on, Forge going back to back and the fight that Halifax put up? Because, I think in some ways that was equally as impressive considering where they were this time last year.
Yeah, it was a heck of a game, I think, especially in the second half. But it was kind of the tactical chess match I think we expected it to be, and Forge's coach Bobby Smirniotis obviously had the upper hand there, because he drilled his team to kind of take away exactly what Halifax likes to do, which is to press you and to hit you on the counter and to play very direct. But Forge just gave them the ball, right? And you can't really counterattack when they're just going to let you have the ball in your own half. And I think it kind of speaks to what Bobby Smirniotis has been able to do with this club over 2 years. Like, they are incredibly tactically flexible. They have, I think I've said it a few times, they played a different front three in every single game in PEI, right? With 11 different players kind of taking a job in there, which is just nuts for a team that scored the most goals in the tournament, right? And he's just kind of managed to build this system, and whenever he talks about it, he's very vague about it. He'll talk about it like there's a way we like to play, and we see some things in the other team, and he's never very specific, but you can always kind of figure it out. Like, they always have a very specific plan, and it never ever seems to not work out for them at this point. But then, yeah, obviously we want to give a lot of credit to Halifax as well, who were last place last year. Even though I think if a couple of those draws, they had a lot of them, had gone the other way, maybe it's a different story. But they played some of the most entertaining soccer in PEI. Like, they had a lot of quality in their front three. I mean, Akeem Garcia was good money to either score or be offside every time he had the ball, which is kind of fun from a striker. So it was, I think, as you said, Mitch, it was just a fascinating game from both teams who played some really good soccer against each other.
Yeah, Charlie, where does that leave Forge kind of heading into this final? I know Canadian Premier League fans are a little bit upset that a potential date might have to wait until the MLS season's done. First of all, what are your thoughts on that? A delayed final date, and then how do you see that matchup going down overall, Forge versus TFC?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the date, like, obviously it is what it is. I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when I was peeking in. I mean, there's nothing you can really do, right? You can't really be a choosing beggar if you're given this ticket to a Canadian Championship final, which you maybe didn't expect a CPL team to be in for a few years. But in terms of the game itself, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, to be honest. Just based on what I kind of just said about Forge and Bobby Smirniotis, kind of the way that they're extremely tactically flexible. Just the thought of Bobby having, like, whatever it's going to be, 3 months or so to plan specifically for TFC, to just watch what TFC is doing and be like, when they do that, we're going to do this to them. Just over 3 months is kind of fascinating to me, because I'm sure that he'll have some kind of trick, because I think we even saw in the final here, we saw them kind of practicing a little bit their counter-attacking game, which is definitely something that they could lean on against TFC. And they do have, it's not like Forge doesn't have any soccer between now and the
Oh no,
final.
they certainly have some soccer.
they gotta play the soccer piggies in October.
I mean, we were all fawning endlessly over their club badge on the Twitter yesterday. It's absolutely delightful. I'm not sure if we're going to see them. I did give Sophia pictures of both the logos, including the alternate pig with gains logo, but maybe we won't see them. And maybe I'll just tweet about them later. But that looks to be a hell of a fun game. And do we know when that is? It's in October, right?
Yeah, I don't think the date has been set, but I think we're pretty sure it's kind of mid to late October, and it'll be on the road. So it sounds like Forge has to head down to El Salvador to play that game.
Fantastic.
Which will be a lot of fun. And then I think if they do advance, they play Tauro, who I think are they from Panama.
They've got a crappier badge, so I don't care.
Yeah, but they're actually quite a good team, who I think we've seen in the CONCACAF Champions League a few times.
I think TFC's definitely played them before.
Yeah, and I think maybe lost to them in the second round. That'll also be on the road. But CONCACAF League is something that Forge talks about a lot. They kind of, I think Bobby Smirniotis even this morning on a radio hit somewhere was talking about how he thinks that was part of the reason they won their championship last year. Just being able to go toe to toe with a big team like Olympia. And kind of, well, at least beat them in the first leg and then kind of crumble in the second on the road. But that's obviously a really valuable experience that I think maybe gets a little underrated.
Indeed. I'm going to move to my second question, because it looks like we're going to go back to TFC. We're going to circle back to TFC. Where would you love to see the CPL in 5 years?
This is a job interview, Jeff. If you could pick an animal that the CPL is, wouldn't you?
I truncated the meaner part because I don't want to get him in trouble. So yeah.
In 5 years, what's that? That's 2025. So a year.
I don't know. 5 years, whatever.
A year before the World Cup.
That's a good show.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I really hope that. I mean, I'm not the commissioner, and he gets asked that question a lot, and he'll say, "I want to have like X teams in the league." I know that obviously expansion is important to the league, so we're hoping to maybe have some more kind of cities join the fun by then. But just in terms of the quality of play, I mean, I really only expect it to go up, and it's already at a pretty good level. So I think we'll start to see maybe clubs a little bit more entrenched as maybe respected sources of young talent development, like when clubs start maybe selling some more players, especially in this off season, which I think we're going to talk about later. Clubs start maybe developing guys that kind of will get their national team opportunities and move on to higher levels. And I think the CPL will be a little bit more respected in that sense as kind of a developmental league. I mean, obviously a professional league, but a league that can produce really good young talent.
I kind of see him on your wall behind you, but how much of a difference does Fonzie and Jonathan David make on the Canadian Premier League, and how much of an impact, I guess, are they going to have in terms of maybe some teams overseas scouting the Canadian Premier League more?
Yeah, yeah. I think was there a story we heard kind of a month or so ago about Barcelona passing on Davies just because he was Canadian
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like
Mhm.
that? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen anymore, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, you do have to think that it changes things a little bit. Like not necessarily. I'm not saying that a CPL player is going to be bought by like Barcelona or Bayern Munich or anything like that.
This is awesome.
I mean, we did see play to the Dutch flight. Second there. Are we good? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
you're back now. Yeah.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
my internet might. Yeah, I think my internet might have dropped out for a second.
No,
yeah,
no, really.
we have seen. Yeah, we saw Emilio Estevez sold to a club in the Dutch top flight this past winter. It felt like a long time ago. So it's happening. It is starting to happen. Like we're seeing clubs kind of around the world kind of at least pay attention to Canada, and there's a lot more in Canada to pay attention to now, which is also important.
Yeah.
Yeah, since we are, of course, a Toronto FC show, I think TFC fans will want to hear, in particular, of how three young players did in the Canadian Premier League this year. Julian Dunn, Tariq Mohammed, and of course Dante Campbell, all getting loaned out to the Canadian Premier League. What were your thoughts on some of their performances, and maybe coming back into the Toronto FC fold, especially Dunn, who is a first team player, of course. What this might mean for them going forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there were four actually, because there was Robert Boscovich and Calvary.
Yeah,
Right. Oh man.
Shout
Sorry,
out.
Robert. Former Ryerson too. I feel bad for missing that one.
Mitch, dude.
That's all right. Okay, so yeah, I think it was kind of a bit of like there was kind of there's some ups and downs here. Obviously, Julian Dunn, I think, was one of the most impressive young players in the tournament, bar none. Like, I mean, he was nominated for under 21 Player of the Year. He kind of came into Valor's backline, which was in 2019 the worst defense in the league, and made it probably in the top three this year. Him and Andrew Jean-Baptiste kind of came in, and to be able to step into a new club like that where you don't know anybody, he arrived fairly late and start every game and play that well at that age is really, really impressive. And I think he was playing under a lot of pressure in games with pretty high stakes because Valor was kind of right in the top four race until the last weekend. So you got to be extremely happy with him. Dante Campbell didn't play quite as much of a role at Valor as Dunn did, but he kind of did a job. He was pretty versatile. He played, I think, on both fullback positions because they just had so many injuries, and he played a little bit in the middle. But he was kind of versatile and did what he was asked. We gotta talk about Tariq Mohammed at Edmonton, who took that difficult red card in one of the games against Cavalry, which that's always disappointing, and it was kind of a disappointing tournament for the team all around. But he looked all right in some of his games. He did manage to win his way back into the side, which is good if you're a young player that kind of makes a dumb decision like that to earn a red card. You want to make sure that they are working to get back in, and he did eventually. I think he played in their last two games. He looked pretty good, and Boscovich too. Like he played a way bigger role for Cavalry than I think I expected, because they chose to go with three at the back, and he pretty much was there most of the time. They had like tons of injuries across the squad. They had a couple of suspensions. I think Jay Wielden was suspended for one of their playoff games. So Boscovich had to step in and play two of their three group stage games, and he didn't really set a foot wrong particularly. I mean, especially playing alongside some really established center backs in the league who will know each other really well. You know, he had Dominic Zator and Mason Trafford and so on, kind of playing next to him. So he did fit in pretty well. I mean, obviously there is kind of growing pains because he's much younger and didn't quite know the system entirely, but he did pretty well, I think, for what you could have expected from him. Is that okay?
Perfect,
Yeah.
Jazz.
Yeah, that's pretty perfect. I think I mean, seeing as we've got a former managing editor of WTR on, I think we're doing a disservice if we don't flip over to the TFC side of the coin. And I think I'll open it up. You were the managing editor in 2018, which was pretty much the Mount Rushmore of Vanny outtakes. So
Other than his first week on the job.
Yeah, other than his first week on the job. We've seen a lot of Vanny outtakes this weekend. Please explain to us and all of our viewers why this isn't 2018.
Well, I mean, for one thing, they're in a playoff spot.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I hear these kind of takes, it's just so kind of knee jerk to me. Like, it seems like people will only kind of look at maybe the last game or so, and I think it's been tough to judge this year as a whole. I think just because of how fragmented it's been, but like I understand people's frustration sometimes.
So do I.
Because like you do see all of these kind of just decisions where he kind of tries to outthink himself and tries to switch something up or throw the other team a curveball when their fastball is striking them out every time.
Mm-hmm.
So it is frustrating in that sense, but I think you got to look at the bigger picture. I mean, if you have players coming in, I think did Tony Gallagher come in from Liverpool and talk about how good a coach he thought Greg Vanny was?
Yep.
I mean that's like
kind of.
No, he didn't.
He complimented his system.
Somebody else.
Oh, okay.
He complimented his system. So there's that. I don't want. He wouldn't say too much about Vanny himself, but he did praise Vanny's system, saying it's very similar to Liverpool's in the way that they play and the way that they want to press and stuff like that. It's very interesting that you have this kind of conversation right now, just because Greg Vanny's contract is coming up at the end of the season. It's sort of a story that's not really talked about as much, just because there's so much uncertainty going around with COVID and everything. We asked Vanny kind of earlier in the season. Maybe during the pandemic, how his contract negotiations were going, and he kind of just said it's been pushed kind of to the side just because of everything that's been going on. So it's really interesting that we're having these discussions now, because I'm sure these are the same discussions that the Toronto FC brass are having.
I mean, it's also interesting that Tony Gallagher complimented our system as an like to Liverpool's, because I can't remember Liverpool ever making 5 changes in the 88th minute and going to. I mean, I know Klopp's a bit of a madman, but that doesn't. I don't remember that. Maybe I missed that game. I mean, I got a question. It comes from our Slack chat, and that is, why is there no championship merch for us to buy in the CPL yet? But I mean, we can probably save that one for later. Oh, and I've also got my lukewarm take, and this is well, I mean, people have been ragging on Omar for his performance last game, and I think it's important to mention that he was playing on the wrong side as cover for Zavs, who was more comfortable on the right, but something's up, and I don't, I'm just using Omar as an example, but my lukewarm take is, do you think certain players, especially veteran players, are starting to feel playing games without a crowd? It's starting to affect their performance?
That for me?
It's for everybody, but
yeah, I don't know. That's kind of an interesting question. I mean, if you kind of go to do a job every week and it's generally the same, you've got kind of tons of fans screaming, and you kind of settle into a routine, and all of a sudden it's very different, and it sounds like you're on a training pitch.
Mm-hmm.
It probably is a little difficult. I think if you asked any of them that, they'd laugh you away from them and tell you, like, absolutely not. I'm
a professional athlete. Exactly.
Yeah. And like, you have to think that is generally the case, but I'm sure that it's in the head a little bit. Like, things are kind of different here, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I will say Josie's best game did come in front of fans, and like very clearly interacted with the fans. And, I don't know how much that played into him getting that goal, but I think it pretty clearly, at least some players are definitely missing the fans.
I mean, I'll add to that and say, remember when the Anibs and their friends broke into the food building, and it was, the first thing out of the lips in the press conference for every TFC player, right? They gave us a boost. We massively appreciated that. It throws more kindling on the fire for me a little bit, because I think Charlie said it pretty eloquently. Like, it's all about muscle memory. Omar is playing on the wrong side of the pitch, and he's got a lot of miles on those legs. So, we've been spoiled with Richie's adaptability, because you can put him in the next pitch over and he's still gonna affect the game. But yeah, I think that there is some. I think that where there's smoke, there's fire with this. And I do agree with Charlie that any player would tell me I'm an idiot for asking the question. But that's why I'm asking you idiots the question.
I'm honestly just still kind of sad that Josie Altara's best game was that game against Montreal.
Yeah.
I mean,
never say never. There's still at least 2 more games on the docket. Which brings us to TFC versus NYFC, a preview for our last 10 to 20 minutes. I'll start. New York City is not scoring goals, but they're not conceding goals either.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's the big stat that stood out to me. 7 games. I think they've only conceded 3 goals. So, they're a difficult team to score on. That's for sure. And only, I think, 1 loss since MLS is back too. So this is kind of the New York City FC side that we've come to expect the past couple of years versus, what we saw in that short little tournament in Orlando, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, and I still think whenever New York City play Toronto FC, something's in the water. Something's up, and you never know. So it's not something that TFC can kind of just look past. I know you have Columbus next, and it'll be interesting to see how Greg Vanney kind of rotates his squad heading into this one, especially with the amount of injuries that we learned about prior to last match. So we're going to talk to Greg Vanney, I guess, shortly after this. So we'll get some more details on that. But yeah, it's going to be an important one just because they have to bounce back. They need to. It's been a questionable month for Toronto FC, to say the least, for after a strong start returning to play. So this one's an important one for sure to get the season back on track.
And this is our rematch after they turfed us out of the COVID Cup in the first round. Maxi Morales is still out, or is he questionable for this game?
I think he's out. He was an unused sub in their last game. He's only really played sparingly in the past few. So if there's any good news for Toronto FC, it's that, certainly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think these next 2 games, certainly against New York and Columbus, big measuring stick, because we've seen Toronto play Montreal, we've seen them play Vancouver, we've seen them play DC. NYCFC in the COVID Cup was probably the last good team that Toronto FC played. So I think we'll learn a lot about them over the next couple of games, won't we, Charlie?
Yeah.
Just making sure you're still listening.
I've been trying to figure out a way to get him into the conversation. For the last
yeah. You guys probably know better than I do at this point. But it's been kind of a weird year. Like you never really find a rhythm, and I think they've always, or at least TFC have always been a team that play well when they hit a rhythm and they can play consistently, right? And that hasn't really happened. They always seem to kind of feed off of, well, obviously they've always fed off of crowds, which we've talked about before, and just consistency. And I think maybe now that you're settled into your new home in Connecticut and you've got at least a little bit of a slate of games, you might be able to kind of figure out kind of a longer term plan. And it's not about like getting through this little Canadian mini table anymore. It's about kind of finishing out this season and kind of hitting your stride before the playoffs.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm curious to see how they match up against Columbus, because, we were talking about the Supporters' Shield, and this could be the year that Columbus wins the Supporters' Shield for playing Cincinnati 100,000 times and just ship it, absolutely murdering them every time they play. So it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I kind of want to just pose it to everybody. What are you content with the Toronto FC season this year? Like what would be a disappointing Toronto FC campaign?
I mean, last week we all said 3rd place or bust in MLS East. For me, Anything less than a deep playoff run, I think, would be a disappointment. But to go micro, I think if we're still seeing these kind of, Matt Doyle wrote a column, his weekly MLS wrap up, and one thing that I took away from it was he said these are the exact mistakes that Toronto FC should not be making as a veteran team. The kind of stuff that we saw in the DC game is absolutely rookie mistakes, and this is not a rookie team. So there's that disconnect there. I would be disappointed if we don't figure that out. And it's interesting that we haven't mentioned Michael Bradley, because Mitch, you actually said to me on the chat, you think one of the reasons that they're so disconnected between the attack and the defense is that there's no Michael Bradley on the pitch.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like they've been organized very well the last couple of games, and we know how important Michael Bradley is, both in terms of what he says and what he does in that role. So I just think that ever since Bradley went down, they just haven't been able to get that midfield and transitional mix right. So I think that's a pretty big key going forward is, Bradley getting back into that midfield.
That's a problem, man, because you're gonna have to figure it out eventually, because he's not going to be around forever.
No,
especially at his age. So I think you have to, if you can't cope without Michael Bradley at how old is he now? He's 30, 32?
I want to say
33,
32, 33.
Yeah, if you can't figure out a way to transition from defending to attacking without him, then questions need to be asked, because that's going to be a problem.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
That's a fair point, but I don't think it's there yet. I mean, I think Ozo was asked to play that Michael Bradley role where he was kind of dropping in to just collect everything. He was the one that was supposed to be on the ball. He's okay at that role. I mean, we started the season obviously without Michael Bradley, and obviously through these last couple of games we had to play without Michael Bradley, and it hasn't looked great. But they've done it without Michael Bradley in the past at times, and I think they've done it at a serviceable rate. And if you want to say that if they can't do without Michael Bradley, then I think we're getting to that age where you kind of have to start turning the page. But we have to enjoy what we have in front of us, right? So if you want to make that argument for Michael Bradley, then what about that argument for Josie Altidore? Can you kind of turn the page on Josie Altidore then if he's not giving you the production, even though he is playing? It's just there's a billion different doors you can open if you say that TFC have to kind of move on past Michael Bradley, I guess, if they can't be okay without him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was kind of going in a couple of different directions there, but what I'm trying to say is that TFC are fine without Michael Bradley, and he is in this lineup most of the time. So I don't think we have to start asking questions about what TFC are without Michael Bradley. There are more important questions to be asked when it comes to turning over this lineup.
And what question is that, Michael?
And I'll talk about Josie Altidore for sure. Is the main question that has to be: is it time for Ayo Akinol to get the start over Josie Altidore? Would he be more serviceable off the bench in sort of a load management kind of role in the twilight of his career? I mean, he's 30 years old, but he's not showing like he's 30 years old. He's not moving like he's 30 years old. He's not staying on the pitch like he's 30 years old. So, if we want to talk about, turning the page and kind of worrying about what's next on this roster, I think we have to start with Josie Altidore. It's definitely not Michael Bradley.
Yeah, we've gone a little overtime here, so we should probably wrap up the discussion. But I did have one more point on the Josie thing, and I think I think Michael's right. I think you start the game with the guy who you're confident can give you 90 minutes. I know you have 5 subs now, but why are you starting the game with a guy that you're not sure if you're going to have to take him off at halftime every game? You put that guy on in the second half when you're confident that he can play at least 45 and give you some good minutes there. I think you got to start with Ayo just from a planning standpoint and not getting yourself in trouble later on in the game. So I think at the moment, I think it should be Ayo that's starting until we can be confident that Josie Altidore is back to at least very close to 90-minute fitness. But Charlie, thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you for sticking around a little bit to nod at all of our hot takes here. We always appreciate an audience. Thanks again to Kevin for providing us this brand new platform, and Sophia for building it for us, and everything else she does behind the scenes. And of course, Jeff and Michael, thank you always to you guys. Plenty of exciting stuff coming up as Toronto FC starts their Hartford portion of the season. So we're excited to talk about all of that. And until next Tuesday, have a great week.